Excuse me, everybody. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another lovely episode of the Sharon Show, the highest quality show on the internet that we can provide
with on the interwebs
with the highest quality audience.
Oh,
ooh, wow. Look, I didn't even call them slaves this time.
Yeah.
Anyway,
really good stuff.
Yeah, we're really excited for today's episode. We just spent a whole bunch of time going over the notes because we wanted to make this as best quality as we could for you guys, but we know you're going to love it either way. So we're excited. You're excited. Let's do it. All right. So I have today's quote, and today's quote is from Ernest Holmes. In 1919, Ernest Holmes wrote, "Fate is in our hands. The whole trouble has been that we reason as men and not as gods." Yeah, it's very apropos to what we're going to be talking about today, everybody.
Why, indeed.
And we're not saying this is the new agey we are God thing. We're just quoting Ernest Holmes and just contemplate it. It's very
could it be
very deep. Ooh, okay. So we got I'm gonna pull a card. I did pull a card, and I gotta figure out where I'm gonna put this deck. Okay. All right. Angel, so we got the angel, the influence of angels deck. We have the Four of Wands, which I know this card very well. And fours represent a solid foundation. If you think of one, then
stability.
You got two, then three. Yeah, four. It's very solid, stable.
Like a table. Stable like a table.
Stable like a table. Exactly. And what this is about, because it's wands, it has to do with fire and creation. So it's about your mental and action also, yes. And it's about your mental creation, whatever it is that you're creating. This signifies that you got to a step where you can have a little bit of a celebration. You see in this card how they're kind of dancing
under
around.
Chuppah.
Yeah. Chuppah.
Or that. Right? Chuppah. However you
and think about it, could even be, if you think about a wedding, right? So say these people are getting married. It's the start of something new. So they're having a celebration, but it's not a celebration where you're celebrating the end or the completion of anything. It's just the next step.
In between. Yeah. Huh? In between. Sometimes.
In between. Yeah. So it always reminds me to, anytime I'm working on something, that it's good to take a break out and kind of celebrate what I've done so far and have a little bit of sense of accomplishment, and to give myself, it's like another reason to give yourself a little self-love, to encourage yourself. Like, look how far we've come, right? This is episode 20, everybody. Look at how far we've come. And everybody knows, if you've been following this, and if you haven't been following, this is your first time watching, hey, welcome. Thanks for watching the Sharon Show. The way we number our episodes is very annoying to Sharon, but it's my system that I have. And it's just kind of like, I look at it as I'm making fun of people who number their podcasts, and there's nothing wrong with numbering your podcast. I'm just kind of, everybody kind of numbers them. So I'm just like, we're just going to do like a 2 and a 2.2 and a 3 and a 333. And we're just all over the place with the way we number them. So, but we made it to 20.
Yeah. And sometimes we have 2 episodes for the number. Sometimes we have 3. We haven't had 4 yet.
And sometimes
we haven't done
1.
that one. Huh?
Like last week, we just had 1.
Yeah. And sometimes we only have 1. Yeah. And just so you know, I'm keeping a record because I'm a spreadsheeter type of person. And I started documenting all our episodes so that I kind of had an idea for where we were. And this is actually episode number 43.
Ooh, I like that, because you get the 4 with the square and the 3 with the triangle.
7. Yeah.
Yeah. And then together it's 7. Yeah. Ooh,
yeah, crazy.
Very cool with those numbers. All right. Wow. That's been a while. So that means it's almost been a year. We almost have 52.
Yeah.
Wow.
About once a week. Yeah. I think we only missed 1 or 2 weeks where we skipped. We had one with you did a separate one by yourself, and then I think that I don't remember, but yeah.
That's pretty consistent though.
Yeah.
There you go, guys. The Sharon Show, the most darn consistent show on this channel. So anyway,
we did terrible podcast. So
yeah, that was pretty consistent for a while. We actually want to get back together. It's just our schedules are just nuts right now, but we'll get that terrible podcast going again.
It was terrible.
It was terrible. So I'm gonna, speaking of all these numbers, I'm gonna pull up some of these cards. So today is 20.
And we didn't do 19. Did you want to do Sun card as well or not?
Yeah, we are gonna. There we go. So here's the Sun card. Now, this was 19, and we had a guest last week, and we talked about a bunch of different things. We didn't really talk too much about the tarot and the sun and what that means. So we will do that today, a little brief overview. I think, though, the thing with the sun is it doesn't need a lot of attention because the sun is in the mainstream. Everybody pretty much knows what the sun is. You get your sun sign in the newspaper and astrology. We've talked about with Ashley Lanice, we talked about sun signs and different signs. So, but this is a really great card to get in a reading or just to look at overall, because I mean, just look at the card. It's just happy. You got a kid riding a white horse. Some people have said it's the same horse from the death card, the white horse. Now it's just on to new life. If you think of baby new year, this has a really like baby new year feel to it. And then you have the sun there, shining bright. You got the nice 4 sunflowers. You got the flowers in the kid's hair or whatever those are. He's got the red flag. It's just signifying a new dawn, really. That's really what this card's about. It's like you reached the light at the end of the tunnel. You made it through that dark night of the soul. And here you go. Here's the sun.
And that was very apropos for last week, actually, to think about it. What we talked about with Scott. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it just stayed in that.
We don't plan this stuff.
despite our efforts, it stayed in alignment, Right. And here's the judgment
really
card.
Try, honestly.
Yeah, I was just trying. So the judgment card is this card is, I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? It's about judgment. It kind of has that feel of revelation to it. You have that like judgment, but the way I look at it though, it's more of you kind of worked on yourself. You made it all the way through all the cards in the major arcana. You're at 20. And this is like the part where you're judged for all of the stuff you've done, all the good stuff though, mostly. It's like all the, like the world, you're on display for the world to see now, your new self, right? That's one way you could look at it. And it's the angel here is sounding the trumpet and letting everyone know it's time. Like, the sunrise came and now it's time to go out in the world and be yourself, be that changed person or that light being or however you want to look at it, that changed man or woman. So and in a reading, this card could mean a lot of different things. It could mean that you're going through some kind of judgment. It could have a negative connotation to it. It could be, but it's always a reminder to stay true to who you are and to just aim your ship toward truth as much as you can. And eventually you're going to get there, And I never really noticed this before, but I like how all the coffins are like floating on water.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I never thought about that either.
Yeah. The baptismal waters. It's like when you arise from a baptism, right?
Yeah. And the water represents emotions as well.
And usually a baptism is supposed to symbolize death that you went through.
And rebirth.
Yeah. So now you're having that rebirth. It's that moment right when your head sticks out of the water and you're like, I'm alive again. Or if they really did drown people and they resuscitated them, this is when they resuscitate you. And you're like, hey, how was that near-death experience you had? I don't know. Who knows? But those are those 2 cards. Just wanted to touch on them.
Awesome.
All right, Sharon, what are we talking about today?
So today we're going to talk about this this topic. We'll call it the Law of One because that's what it's called by people, and we'll get into it. So I will talk about first how I came across this information and how I came across this material. So I was talking to a friend, and he sent me a video, and I had no really, how shall I say, I had no background for the video. I was watching it and I was like, I don't know what they're talking about, because it was like what stuff was going over my head, and I'm like, okay. And it was, but the thing that kind of kept me watching it was the guy, Brian Scott, I believe is his name. He's the one who does the Reality Revolution podcast, I think. And he's the one who always posts Neville Goddard stuff. So I kind of wanted to hear what he had to say. And this other guy that I didn't really know was talking to, he was a different podcaster. His name's Aaron Abke. And they were talking about something. And I think the podcast or the episode was Jesus a Wanderer or something like that. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. I'm just kind of like, I was keeping my ears perked for anything that like maybe resonated. Very little was resonating. So first time I watched it, like went over my head. But what he did mention was these two books. One is called The Law of One, and the other one is called A Course in Miracles. Now, I have not even touched The Course in Miracles at all, so I won't even talk about it at all. But what I started with, for whatever reason, because that's what happened, is I wrote the two names of those books down, and then I paused the video. I went looking for the books. I found them online. I found people who did audios and maybe even found PDF about it or something. But I was like, audios, because it's really easy to like listen to something and be able to be doing something while I'm listening. So, and I bumped into that guy, Aaron, because I think he said in the video, he said, oh, I have a playlist about the Law of One. I was like, well, perfect. I'm just going to watch that. So there are like 39 videos so far in that playlist. And I started going through them. I just started going through them and I was hooked. I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? And I sent it to Brandon and he started going through it as well. Well, let's see. That's kind of how I found the information. So I wanted to, I guess, shoot it over back to Brandon to talk about kind of, well, actually, I'll just give a little bit of background on what it is. So this guy, Aaron Abke, breaks it down and he talks about the various aspects of this book. And it's actually what's called channeled material. So a medium had to channel this higher consciousness being or multiple being entities, whatever, to speak this. And there was a scribe, there was a person asking questions, there was the medium, and there was a scribe. So I'll go from there and then I'll let Brandon talk about channeled material.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing I want to say about channeled material is that it's highly suspect, right? Because how do you know there was really a person in contact with this other entity, or maybe they were just really high on, mushrooms or something? Like, who knows what they were talking to? Maybe it was an aspect of themselves, or maybe they're just putting people on to sell books, right? I get all that stuff. The way that I view and the way I approach channeled material is I view it in the same way that I would view some holy texts. It's mostly allegory, and it's what the other thing you really have to keep in mind is that whenever somebody's saying something that they're channeling, they're still coming from their own point of view on things. So whatever comes through in the words that they're using and the way they're describing things, like if they're talking about like different planets in the solar system and stuff, it doesn't mean, if you don't believe in the heliocentric model and you're like, wait a minute, I thought there was a dome and those lights were just lights in the sky or whatever. That still could be true. But from that person's point of view, if they were a heliocentrist and they believed in that, then when they're talking to this other entity, it's going to come through them like that. And that's really important because we'll get to this later, but the entity says it can't say anything to affect your free will. So it's not going to try to open your mind to...
It's not going to woke rape you.
It's not going to woke rape you. Exactly. You nailed it, Sharon.
God.
So it's not going
I
to woke
never
rape
thought
you.
of that either.
It's just really a transformation or transmission of information. So it's like the telephone game. You know, if you're going to tell somebody one thing and then by the time it gets all the way around the room, if you're playing with people who are at least kind of smart and they have a goal in mind, that you'll get the message, but it might not be in the same exact words. So that's exactly how I approach anything that's channeled or even really holy text. Like when I'm reading the Bhagavad Gita and stuff like that, like, I don't know if a war really happened, but I'm reading between the lines to see what information there might be able to benefit me. So when Sharon and I came across this and we're all excited to talk about it, it's not like we found a new religion and now we're like going to get a new wardrobe and we're going to chant. We're going to, like, what we're doing is we were already looking into a bunch of stuff, right? Down by the river. Or how's that song go? We're going to have to sing that song now. I met Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Solid
Jesus
as a rock.
met
That's
the woman at the well by Mahalia Jackson.
Yeah, there you go. So we're not joining a new cult or whatever. We're just trying to see how these ideas can fit into our worldview, how we can make more sense of the place in the realm that we're in, and what maybe our mission could be while we're here. So this stuff really started to resonate with us, and that's why we wanted to talk about it. But I just wanted to give a little disclaimer about channeled material because, listen, I get it. Because I even heard one of the channeled works. I don't think it was this one, but one of the channeled works, somebody was telling me that, like, the guy was sleeping with a woman, like he had to get her to have an orgasm or something to get to that level of consciousness to access, so I get that there's some really weird, crazy stuff going on around channeling, but it still doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the message, right? You could still glean something out of it, because even at the end of the day, if it just came from this person's subconscious, it could be that our consciousnesses are all linked to the universe and somehow they're able to tap and get a direct line through.
Accessing the Akashic record.
Yeah, that's exactly how Edgar Cayce,
right?
Yep. Okay. Edgar Cayce, yeah, that's how he explained it. So I just want to give that a little bit of a disclaimer up front. So listen, we get it, guys. We're still the Oversharing crew. We didn't shave our heads.
But I would like to add to that.
Please do.
You said, like, are they trying to sell something or anything like that? And from what I looked into, one of the guys, I think, and I haven't looked deeper into it, but one of the guys, the actual scribe, he still lives, he's alive, and he's part of this group, llresearch.org, if you go to that website. But they provide that information free. They're not charging anybody for the PDFs and the downloads of the materials. And if you want to buy a physical copy of a book, then you buy the physical copy, but they're not trying to charge people for anything. They're freely giving the online content free. So I thought that was really neat. And they still continue to do channeling and also teach people to channel so they can maybe do future things.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah. So you could kind of tell that they don't have any nefarious, maybe they do. But what I'm saying is, even if they do, it doesn't matter. That's the way I feel. Like, even if somebody has bad intentions, sometimes they help people without even meaning to. It's like, it's just the way the universe works. And when you're dealing with truth and stuff like that. So that was just our little disclaimer.
Right. And then the other thing that we wanted to say is that the purpose of channeling is to aid in our spiritual evolution. So that was the whole purpose of the channeling of this information.
Yeah. And that's how the entity, which is named Ra, we'll get into that, but he or it or whatever was expressing that that's the reason why they will do that why they will allow themselves to be channeled and why they share this information. It's because they're trying to their purpose is to aid in man's spiritual evolution. All right. So the first part of what we learned about this are the 7 different densities of consciousness that exist. And they align up with the 7 chakra systems, actually. And the way this works is it goes basically from one dimension, 1D to 7D. And our consciousness is on an evolutionary path from 1 to 7, just basically the consciousness. And so we have the lower densities, which is the first density is air, earth, water, fire, which are the 4 elements. And that corresponds with the root chakra, which color is red. And the next one would be 2D, plant and animal life, things that can grow and have a life cycle. And that's orange and associated with the sacral chakra. And then the realm that we exist in is 3D, just like Jaws in the movie theater back in the day. 3D, baby. It's about self-realization, free will, and it is yellow, and it corresponds with the solar plexus, which is kind of crazy because our sun is yellow.
Yeah, there you go. The sun. So, and the reason for this density, so Ra describes us as when he's talking, when he's channeling, he, she, it, they, because it's a complex consciousness. It's multiple. So we haven't explained that yet, but that's what Ra is. So Ra is this social memory complex that it's a complex consciousness or collective consciousness that is being channeled, right? And it called itself Ra, like RA. So it calls us when it speaks the way it speaks is very different than one would even, like it uses interesting words. So it calls us mind, body, spirit complexes because we are beings that are mind, body, and spirit. And obviously we're complex. So we're mind, body, spirit complexes. And it calls itself a social memory complex, which is like I guess a group,
like a hive mind.
Yeah, like a group of higher consciousness beings that are light beings. They're no longer in physical bodies, that have risen to this level of consciousness where they are polarized to the positive, and they're doing the greater good. They're here to help us if we need help. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
And we'll get onto we'll briefly explain the other densities as well, up to 7. But the way I view this and kind of what they were saying is it's just about the evolution of consciousness and where it starts, and then how it just goes up to the different levels. So if you think of any inanimate object that's made of one of the elements, it's technically does have consciousness. So rocks and water, air, fire.
I was just going to say, I want to interject just real quick because I just heard Crrow talk about, I think it was episode 415 with a holistic doctor of OBGYN or something like that. They talked about quartz crystals, and they said how they're like alive, which, I mean, so then it's like, okay, so rocks are alive, like in some sense, there's something there. And like, I think even there's ancient, like native peoples who say that, like the trees, the rocks, that everything has a spirit to it. So could it be?
Yeah. So quit throwing rocks, everybody. Jeez. No, but yeah, no, I hear what you're saying exactly. And I think that when you start to look at our realm in that, with that point of view, it just opens up a whole new dimension of thought and care. And what's the word I'm looking for? Well, I'll think of it. But yeah, it's just it's a better way to see the world, kind of. And so the way I kind of view it is I feel like our consciousness has to start somewhere. It starts at the bottom and then it just moves up, and then it goes to plant and animal life. And then it comes here where we get free will and we have self-realization, and we realize that we become aware of ourselves and aware of our consciousness. Whereas before, maybe the consciousness in a rock or a tree or whatever is just tuned into the ether, and it's a different experience. I don't know. I don't have words to put into it, but I'm just trying to overshare over here.
Right. And it's not self-aware like we are. But something else to know is that when we do transition into this 3D realm, we also take on this veil of forgetfulness, is what Ra calls it. So we don't remember where we came from. We don't remember allegedly any of our past lives, or that we were even a light body, perhaps, or whatever we were before we came to this realm to experience this. And know that we have a path to get to the 7D. But in the meantime, we're here in 3D. The next one's 4D, then 5, obviously, on and on.
And that makes a lot of sense, because if you're going to be, this is allegedly the only realm where there is free will. So if you're going to be in a realm where it's about free will, because it's about your choice and what you would do, and having to experience the negative in order to want to be positive, or experience the positive and realize that you want to be negative, whatever it is, you get to make that choice. So I think the forgetfulness aids in that, because now you could make a choice based on who you really are, right? Not based on what you knew and all this other stuff. It's based on you and who you are and your intuition and all this stuff. You actually get to make a choice on what you want to do. And then in this realm, you also see that your choices have consequences, and you could be aware of them or you can not be aware of them. But once you start to be aware and you realize the cycles that happen, and this is stuff we've talked about a bunch, when you're kind of fucking up in an area and it just keeps cycling back around and smacking you in the face. Once you wake up to that, you can get out of that cycle. You could spiral up. And that's really what this is about. It's kind of like a learning, or could it be that's what this is about? This is what they're saying. It's just a place for us to learn, or for our consciousness really to learn, and to make the correct choices over and over again, or make the wrong ones until we realize that we want to make the right ones, not because of the law and effect, but because it just feels right to us. That's why I think that forgetfulness is about, because if we can remember past lives, if we have past lives, then we would just come into this realm and we'd already know what to do, but now it's kind of like we get all these chances and all these times to go through it each time individually and make the right choice, or whatever, the correct choice or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into like good and evil, but go ahead.
And something interesting that I believe it's Ra mentioned this, but Aaron Abke in his channel was talking about how there was a time in the past where there was no veil of forgetfulness. And because there was no veil of forgetfulness in 3D, there really was nothing really happening, as far as like people never really polarized negative. They only just, because they already knew their past. They remembered everything. They didn't have to work anything out.
There was no challenge either.
Yeah. When they experienced negativity, there was nothing to really work out. So they later on introduced this veil of forgetfulness in order to provide this more of a free will, in other words.
Yeah, more of a test, really.
Yeah, totally. Because like a free will with, like, you're blinded with not knowing why you came here or anything.
Yeah, it's like if you hit your head and you woke up and you had amnesia and you couldn't remember anything. Say that happens to me tomorrow or whatever, right? And then now I have to go about my life just using my intuition and just trying to figure it out all over again in that way. Like, what if I want to be good or evil or whatever, but I can't rely on my crazy past like I do now to say, no, I don't want to go down that road, So yeah, I think it's a very interesting concept. And again, like I said, this is all excuse me. It's all allegory, right? In my mind anyway, could it be? So you have to kind of read between the lines here and get out of it what works for you. We're not trying to tell you how it is, but we just think that, this is what we're oversharing. There you go. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
And then the way this works, do you have something to say or?
No,
Okay.
you can keep going.
Is so basically in this realm, the way they broke it down is there's two ways that you can move up to the higher realms through positivity, a positive polarization, or a negative polarization. And to move up in the positive, you have to be 51% positive or higher. And then you can move up to 4D, which is the green, the heart chakra, and you could be all about love. And then you got to do whatever you got to do in that realm, right? They don't really tell you, but they give you some hints. But you can also go up in the negative polarization, but you
Which
have to
people
be
would call evil, right?
evil.
These days, they would call that evil.
But you have to be 95% evil or in the
or more
negative polarization or more to move up. So it's actually a lot more challenging.
Which is hard, right?
Which is really hard. And it's funny because you think about all the stuff that's going on around us in this world, and you're like, all right, so some people are really trying to get that 95%. You know what I mean? Right. They're trying as hard as they can. Maybe not everybody, but maybe the people at the top of these structures who everybody blames everything on, you know, maybe they are these people who are like, yo, we're moving up. And I mean, you know, well, they're like the Jeffersons moving on up with eugenics. We're going to kill all these silly people and move up anyway, or make them kill themselves, which is even more evil. Think about it, right? You could kill somebody, which is evil. But if you could like convince someone to kill themselves, that's like even on a higher level of like,
like Inception, like planting it in their minds.
Yeah, you just like talk them into it. Like this movie Dogma, that was a Kevin Smith movie who he made like Clerks and Mallrats. He had this one movie called Dogma. And like in the beginning, it has Ben Affleck and who's the other one? Jason Bourne. Who's Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. And they're angels, and they're like in the beginning of the movie, they're angels, but they're in like human form, and they're talking to these nuns, and they're basically talking the nuns out of their faith. They're like hitting them with the atheist argument. It's like, what are you doing, man? They're just like screwing with them. But anyway, yeah. Yes. So you can move up, but you actually skip the fourth dimension, the next one, because that's all about love. So you go on to the fifth dimension, and then eventually though,
skip it.
Everybody works it out, right? So we always talk about people will spiral, and then they like to get into victim mode, and then they call everything evil. And there's all this evil out there and all this wrong stuff. And I'm not saying that things that aren't going on can't be called evil, but what we're trying to say here is that it's, if you take enough far back view of it all, you could see how it's just part of the plan. It's part of the process. And I think that it says that, like you say in the notes here, it makes Sharon think of more of a good and evil as like a polarity, like positive and negative.
Yeah. I don't even see, like, when somebody's like, that's evil, like, I don't even see it that way anymore. I just see it as positive or negative. Like, okay, that person is polarizing negative. And you can't really, like, the only real thing you can do is be loving to them, because that will remove some of that negative polarity from them, and they won't be able to get as negative as possible. Like, if you just show them love or kindness or whatever, it like messes them up for going too evil, too negative, right? So the fact that people are like, they're evil, and like allegedly, they're evil, and like, like pointing the finger and getting mad at them and angry and blah, blah, blah. That's polarizing them more negative. You're just contributing to more of their negative polarity. And if you only just had compassion for them, forgiveness and love for them, that would actually remove some of that negative polarity from them, because they can't be near that. They can't even be near it without polarizing positive.
Yeah. And we talked about this in a bunch of past episodes, but if this is the first time you're joining us, when we say things like this, we don't mean that you can't ever have the right to self-defense or to even kill somebody if you have to, but it's all about how you do it. And it's all about in the moment where your heart is and where your mind is while you're doing it. Are you like, yeah, I'm going to kill, and you get into a rage squirt? Or are you saying to the self, you know what? Are you saying to yourself, I don't want to do this. This is something I have to do. This person's coming at me. They're trying to harm me. They're trying to harm my family. It's probably the way they were raised. Their mom was probably a real piece of shit. They probably got raped all the time, whatever it was, thrown in a dungeon. But guess what? This is what's happening. And now it's on me. I have to take them out. So you kind of just do it with this humility, and you do it while you're empathizing with them. And when I say empathy, I'm not talking about consent, right? Compassion isn't consent. You just understand where they're coming from. And this shields you at the end of the day. And I'm not saying that you have to do it this way or you don't have to. And if you don't, then you're going to get judged. But what I'm saying is when you do it this way, it shields you from their negativity, from their evil. If you have that love and light or whatever, is that understanding and that compassion, and you're empathizing with them, even as you slay them, like it says in the Bhagavad Gita, right? You're just realizing that it's part of a plan, that you're just an instrument of God at this point, and that you are doing what has to be done, but you don't get excited about it. And you don't get, because that's when you start to get the negative, right? That's just like the Jedi, right? When Luke is confronting the Emperor with Vader right there, and the Emperor's like, strike me down. He wanted him to use his hate and his anger to do it, right? And that's what it is. You don't want to use the hate and anger. And this is really high level stuff. I'm not even saying I am capable of it. You know, if somebody's shooting at me or trying to rob me or whatever, and I had to shoot him back, I don't know how I would feel. I'd probably like, fuck you, man. You know what I mean? Like, but that's the wrong way, right? That's not to shield yourself from all this stuff. So I just wanted to add that little caveat. And so people didn't think we're like some new age crazy hippies over here. I'm a heathen, not a hippie, damn it.
Yeah. And like Brandon said, it's not about condoning the quote evil or the negative path. But something else that you said too, it's like, because you're talking more about people that you're close to, or people that if it's like affecting you right there. But we're talking about sometimes people that you don't even know them. I mean,
yeah.
Oh, you had a meme that said, do you even know them? Remember?
Yeah. Do you even know them? No. Do you even like them? No. Yeah. And that has to do with like the quote unquote controllers or the president or whoever you think is making decisions that's affecting your life, or all these pedophiles in the sewers and stuff like that. What we're saying is, because you can't do anything about that. There's nothing you can technically do. You can just take care of the people around you. You can make sure the kids around you, your own children, are in a safe environment and no one's screwing with them. Yeah, do all that stuff. We're not saying to just sit around and be like, oh, just show them love and light. No. What we're saying is those people at the top of the structures, you could send them this love and light, because, and basically all that means is that you understand, well, you know, all these people at the top, they were probably raised in this satanic environment where they were probably abused, and then that's just how the abuse gets
passed on.
Exactly. And they're just a product of their environment, so you can empathize with them in that way. But now if they come at you directly, then yeah, you have the right to do whatever you have to do, self-defense, the positive use of force. So yeah, I just like to say that.
And also, like you said, send them love and light or whatever. You can do that even in your own imagination. And that's having compassion too, is just imagine yourself. Like, it's hard, but Crrow says, like, I think Fortune has talked about it, and Crrow has distilled it down to give them a hug in your mind, like in your imagination. Can you just give that person that you dislike the most, can you give them a virtual hug in your mind? Can you see yourself doing that? And even if you step back and say, you know what, okay, I can't give them a hug, I just can't, but can you look at them and smile at them? Maybe even just that, like baby steps, you know, like, because even that probably changes things.
Yeah. And maybe. It really does, because it changes your own view of yourself. Or you're not a victim anymore to this. You're acknowledging, you're actually showing gratitude for the evil things they do, because you realize that all these evil things at the end of the day woke you up. and they're also the catalyst for all the good things that are going to happen because of the evil. So it's like a settling, of
That's
everything.
a good word, because catalyst is the word that's used in the law of one, which is also called the raw material. If I didn't say it before, the book is either called raw material or the law of one. But yeah.
Well, there's something else too that we didn't write down that we definitely should talk about. And that is, if you're ever feeling like you're being affected so when you get into the higher densities, you have the light beings, the negative and the positive ones, right? So if you ever feel like you're being affected by one of these negative beings, the best thing to do is to not be afraid. And Ra says that you show them love and light because they can't handle it and they just automatically run away. So the way I took that as, say I have a habit that I'm trying to kick and I'm really mad, like say I can't stop watching the pornos, right? What I'll do is, if I end up watching the pornos, instead of getting mad at myself and fearing or being afraid of it, I just say, it's okay that I did this. It's all right. It's fine. And I could look at it. What's that?
It's part of your journey.
It's part of my journey. I could look at it as a negative entity that's trying to affect me, that's trying to get me to do this. But instead of doing some kind of like exorcism where you're going with the body of Christ and the blood of Christ will redeem you and all in holy water, you could just say, you look at this entity as a exterior thing in the world. And you could say, I understand. I show you love and light, like this is why I do this, because things that happened to me when I was young, I was subjected to all this crazy stuff when I was 10 or 12, and then it affected me. So now I want to watch the pornos, right? But you could say it's fine though. And then in that way, you're showing it the same compassion and understanding that I just talked about for when you have to off somebody through self-defense, right? You're showing it that, and then it just goes away, and then I don't know. That's how I'm using it, like in a real world situation, but it could be any kind of attack that you feel like you're doing, like even if you're in a dark room somewhere and something happens, you get scared and you think a demon's coming or whatever it is. Because some people experience this differently. They'll experience audio or visual, auditory or visual representations of this demon. You just don't have fear, because that's the only power. You're giving it the power over you by fearing it. So if you don't have fear and you have love and light, because you don't want to be like, oh, I can beat you, I'm more stronger, my God's stronger than you. That's just that really reminds me of pride, like, and all that stuff. So you just show love, light, and understanding. And the way that Ra explains it is, these beings can't be near love and light. So they just,
because it'll affect their negative polarization. They're trying to be as negative as possible. They're trying to be 95% or more negative, because if they dip down, then they have to polarize positive, and they don't want to. And that's okay. That's their choice. That's their journey. But, if you don't show them fear and you show them love, they'll have to go away, because if they experience any kind of love, they'll polarize the other way.
And there's good news for them too, because Ra says at some point, we can't remember if it's after the 5th dimension or 6th dimension, they actually switched polarizations. Like they're not allowed. A negative being isn't allowed to go up to the highest one,
to 7D, yeah,
and to the 7D. And what happens is, just like we call upon positive forces to help us, and they come like Ra and all this stuff, and however it happens in your life, through synchronicities, through these coincidences that might happen through certain things, negative people also get help. And I mean, you can see that in the world, right? How people who are living fear-based lives and they're just in the spiral and all this negative stuff is happening, but it's actually helping them along their path. So these entities, when they leave from the 3rd dimension and they're 95% negative, they're in the higher dimension. And when they're helping people in the lower dimension, after a while, all that help, they start to care for them and they start to develop love, and that gets them out of that negative polarity. But it's like they just have to learn the hard way. And it's just like Darth Vader, right? Darth Vader had to try to help his son Luke Skywalker come to the dark side, and by trying to help him, that's what caused him to flip over and then throw the Emperor over the freaking side of the rail.
He
he
loved
had to
his
go all
son.
the way though. He had to literally become half machine and all gross and nasty and kill everybody in the universe and be this feared guy. But yet he started to help his son and his heart opened up and it just boom,
Love, love,
yeah,
love, love, love.
it crept in. And I think people who are, it's just like when you're closest to rock bottom, whatever it is that you have, it's an alcohol addiction or whatever. Those are the people who flip over, just like Scott was talking about last week about how his substance abuse issues and stuff. When you're close to that, it's because you're all negative. And then when that little bit comes in, it's like the catalyst that you need. And it's just boom, it just flips you automatically and you polarize the other way. And now you want to go help others. Now you want to help other people with their addictions and stuff. I feel it's the same way because people just get addicted to this negative, they get addicted to controlling and they get addicted to all this power that they have and stuff. So it's like a rock bottom moment for them. And the people here, they want to experience this negative stuff. So they're helping them and they're helping them along their path. So, and again, we're talking about the long game, right? This is the long millions of years. Who knows how long this takes? Maybe it's only in an hour in some simulation tank somewhere. I don't know. But what I'm saying is the way we experience it, it just seems like lifetimes on top of lifetimes.
Yeah.
And so the fourth dimension.
Yeah.
4D is the heart chakra. It's all about love. It's the green ray.
Absolutely.
So that's where we're gonna head to next, allegedly. So
yeah, which makes me wonder, like you see a lot of kind of new agey people talking about we're moving to 5D, and I'm like, okay, where did 4D go? Because we're in 3D.
Well, maybe right? They're moving
we're in 3D, right? Are we not? Where's 4D?
What about the 4D? We're gonna go right to 5.
Go.
You know what that 4D, means?
And we got the 4 of wands.
Yeah.
4. Wow.
And so what does that tell you about the new age movement? They're trying to move up in the negative way. They're trying to skip that fourth dimension, that the heart green ray dimension.
Crazy.
See, that's while people will tell you their intentions without even meaning to. If you knew that ahead of time and you heard somebody say that, you'd be like, whoa, wait a minute, what did you just say? Are you trying to just skip the 4? Okay.
I kept wondering, like, I would see messages like that and I'm just like, I would see memes and I'm like, what are they talking about? Like, what is 5D that, like, where'd 4D go? Did you not want to go to 4D? And it makes so much sense now that you're like, yeah, they want to skip it. Kind of like the negatively polarized people. Yeah, like them.
Yeah. And they're getting it from the people at the top, the people at the top that know what they're doing with all this stuff, that are able to so eloquently weave in the truth with all this deception, just like a worm on a hook. You got a worm swimming along and a fish eats it. It's great. But that worm with a hook in it, that's like, no,
that worm,
it's going to get you. So, so that's the fourth dimension. The next one's 5D. It represents the throat chakra, which is blue. Above that, we have the sixth dimension, the third eye chakra, indigo. And then 7D is the crown chakra, which is even actually above us. So it's represented by the color violet. And from what they say, it just recycles again. Once you go through that, then you hit another 7. So it's just like, we're always going up.
It's like the piano, like the octaves, right? Yeah. After the 7th key, you have the 8th, which is the octave, and you start all over doing, you just keep going. You just keep, and the way Ra describes all of this is that it's like the creator in his mind getting to know itself and what it is. I mean, it kind of reminded me of, like, sorry, I may be misspeaking for Ra, but to me, it reminded me of the Kybalion and what Hermeticism talks about with like kind of like the living in the mind of God, where we're all like little tiny pieces of God. Like, just like we talked about when somebody writes a book and the author creates all these people that are interacting with each other, characters that interact with each other. And it's like that. That's God. And then we're all these little pieces of that, and we're interacting with each other. So it's like an eternity of God getting to know itself.
Yeah.
Is the way I understood it. But just to go back to the 4D, 5D, 6D, because I forgot that 5D is when you finally get to being a light body, is what it is.
Oh, okay.
5D and 6D, you're like a light body. There's no physical. But I think 4D, we would still have the these physical bodies.
Yeah,
but we're like kind of we're learning love, and we're transitioning, and this takes hundreds, if not thousands of years for us to get to the point where we're actually, as a collective, we get to the point where we can be harvested to the next dimension, or the next, density, I should say, because dimensions and density are different words, but yeah.
Yeah. In this context, though, they're using them the same way, kind of.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to add something to what you said too about the author thing. So just to put it in really plain words for people, J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, The Silmarillion, he has this whole universe. Frodo is an aspect of J.R.R. Tolkien. It doesn't mean Frodo is God. So when we say we're pieces of God, we're not saying we are God ourselves, but in a way we kind of are, because we're a piece of him. But we're not. It's not like the new agey thing where we're like, we are God. It's just like, no, we're aspects of God as a character plays out. We're just using this as a little bit of a analogy there. Yeah, that's the word I always forget. I need an analogy to remind me to remember the word analogy.
Metaphor. Is metaphor another similar word?
Yeah, metaphors. Yeah, that's a good one too. It's like a metaphor. So it's just like we're like Frodo Baggins or whoever you want to pick. We're not J.R.R. Tolkien himself. We're just an aspect of that. So yeah.
Right. So
I'm just steering the ship right through all the new age, because if we got new listeners, we don't want them to think we're crazy. Well, I mean, we are crazy, but it's fine
in some ways. Yeah. And something interesting, which I'll just throw in there because I remembered that we allegedly moved into 4D in 2012, but I don't really know what that means. So are they saying that we just need to get to 5D because they already knew that we're in 4D? Or you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
well, I think the way that Ra explains it, 2012, that the consciousness is going to start to shift. It's like the very, very beginning stages of all this stuff. So we still have to, there's an overlapping period. It's like when an age shifts, it's not one clear marker where everything's different. Aspects start to come into reality, and it just like blends over. It's like when you're mixing a song, like when I'm DJing a wedding and I'm mixing a song toward the end of one, is that some other song coming in, but it's still I'm still playing
from the other one.
I'm still playing I Got a Feeling by the Black Eyed Peas, but I think I hear, is that Danza Kuduro coming in, or yeah, it's the same thing. And you just extrapolate that and you take it as it could take hundreds of years, but it's just, we're in the beginning stages of it. And I think that has a lot to do with this new age movement coming in, because I think the new age movement is put in a place to co-opt a lot of these internal struggles that people are going through. They're going to latch onto it because, like I said, there's a lot of truth in it. But I mean, hey, I successfully navigated through it. So if I could, I think anybody could.
Right.
Especially if they watch the Over Sharon show.
And speaking of navigating through this and getting through these, if you're going to get to love, you can't do that. And I'm just going to speak out loud here. You can't do that without doing your shadow work, without getting to know who you are. Because if you don't get to know who you are, then you're going to be on the negative path probably. But if you do want to get to know who you are, that's when you can learn to love. Because if you learn to love your own self, you can learn to love others.
And
it starts with you.
And think of what a shortcut, not a shortcut, but like a warp or like an easier road it is to just show the people in this realm that we're supposed to hate, but to show them love and light in the way we described it, not in the new agey way, but in the way we described it.
And the way Jesus basically.
And the way we did, we talked about loving your enemies. Go back to episode 18. Watch that if you haven't. I highly recommend that episode, not just because I made it with Sharon and it was awesome, but because we really tackled a lot of this stuff. And if you can learn, it's like you're supercharging yourself to be in this positive polarity. And again, if nothing else, you're just making it easier on yourself. At first, it's going to feel weird, but after a while, once you start to embody it and you start to live it, it does make everything so much easier, because when something happens to you, no matter what it is, somebody cuts you off in traffic or all this stuff, you're not taking it so personally, and you're not going through this cycle of like hate and anger and all this stuff. Yeah, those emotions will still come up and you sit with them as they do. And same thing, you show them love and light, but you don't try to push them away. But after a while, it just starts to go away, really. And I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with anger. It's an emotion that exists as a tool, you know, but it's just when you get stuck in it and it affects your whole life, just like the ego. We say it's just a tool, just like a gun. If you get stuck in that, it could make your lessons here harder to learn. You're going to learn more through suffering than you are going to learn through joy. Exactly.
Right. And just as kind of a little recap and maybe restating a little bit, the material is called, or the book is called The Raw Material, and it's made up of all the sessions that these three people had. The lady who channeled it and the two guys. One of the guys was the one who asked the questions, and the other guy was the one who was the scribe. And this was back in the 80s. And let's see, Raw is a collective consciousness, but it calls itself a social memory complex because that's the terminology it uses. And it says it's from Venus, from back when Venus was undergoing its, 3D, 4D, so now it's a 6 density social memory complex. So they are light beings, a collective of light beings. Yeah, the other thing, again, we said that they don't infringe upon your free will, that if there is something that you're asking, because they don't, again, like Brandon and I said, they won't woke rape you. So there's a questioner, the guy who's asking the question. So he was asking things about this realm, about people, about things, and it was explaining all these things to him. And if there was something that it did not want to answer because it was going to be perhaps woke rapey, it would refrain from answering, and it would just say that it wasn't, going to answer the question.
Next question, please.
And I don't know how it did that because I haven't really quite yet read The Raw Materials. I've just been doing.
I plead the fifth. Oh, and by the way, when Sharon says this, she's saying raw materials because it could sound like she's saying raw material. I'm just clarifying that. So it's when we say this, we mean raw, or even if I say raw material, you might think I'm saying raw materials, but it's called the raw material. Anyway, go ahead.
You're pronouncing it differently. I didn't even notice.
Well, no, it's just the way you're saying it. To me, it sounds like you could be saying raw material. That's all.
Because I say it the same. How you say law. Wait, what's the other word that I say? War. And war. And I don't say it like WORE.
No, I'm not saying that you're saying.
I know.
Oh, all right. Sharon, listen, we gotta have a conversation here. You are just mispronouncing this.
I'm just saying that I'm a West Coaster, so I don't distinguish between the O sound that the East Coasters do, which is the aw. They say aw. And like West Coasters don't do that. So I didn't realize that I'd even done that. That's all I'm saying.
Oh yeah, no, I hear you.
I didn't think. Sorry, we went off topic.
No, that's cool. I just wanted to let people know, just in case they're like, "Wait, what's raw material?"
Yeah, Ra as in the sun god of the Egyptians, which we didn't bring up, but maybe we can. So the one of the questions that came up was, why is your name Ra, or why do you call yourself Ra, or whatever? And it was something to do with back in the days of the Egyptians, they worshipped the sun god as Ra. And so I can't remember if it was because of Ra coming to them, then they called the sun Ra, or I don't remember if it was one or the which way or the other it was. But anyway, it was related to the Egyptians. And they came to the Egyptians to help them because at that time, they were only living up to like the age of 30, which was not enough time to like live a life and like spiritually mature enough to move on to the next density. So they just weren't moving. So Ra came to kind of help them. And that was kind of the story. There's more to it, but we don't need to go into all the detail.
Yeah,
and
and again, you could look at it
about
allegorically, and you could just say that civilization was stagnating. Whether maybe they weren't actually living to 30, maybe that's just the best way for Ra, that consciousness, to get the point across to these people and for people to understand it.
Yeah. So yeah, just also to quickly summarize again that they are at a higher consciousness level, so they communicate via telepathy. And I don't remember if we said this, but they share all their memories with each other. And so like Brendan was saying, it's like a hive mind, but a good one. And
it's all a choice, right?
Yeah.
Because when people think hive mind, they might think of like Rick and Morty and like those episodes, which I know you haven't watched that show, which is fine. But what I mean is like, it's not like a cult where everyone's like drinking the Kool-Aid and doing this. It's a choice that each one of these separate consciousnesses made because of all the stuff they went through in their other density. They realized that, oh, this is the way that we want to go forward now. Like this is the best way, man. Because I feel like they all still have a choice. It's all free will. Maybe in this realm we make that ultimate choice, then we go up to the next one, but it was still a choice for them to do that.
Yeah. And one thing that was interesting to me is that as Aaron Abke was describing the difference between like a positive social memory complex versus a negative social memory complex, it was that the negative one was not like unified and everybody loving each other and being like, you can have all my memories from my past and you can telepathize with me whenever you want, because basically we all love each other and we all trust each other. That's not the same with negative social memory complex. They are more like a dictatorship because one of them will always want to rule over others. It's like slavery. And Brandon was going to bring up an example.
It's like Star Wars again. Here we go. You have the Sith. So you have a Sith Lord and then you have an apprentice. So think of the Emperor and Darth Vader. And the only way that you could become the next Sith Master Lord is you take out the other one. Because go back to Star Wars, even the Emperor Palpatine, he told a story about how the guy killed his mentor, right? He had to sneak in it when he was sleeping and kill him or whatever. And that was just his own story. He was just telling his own story. I think Darth Sidious is what he said or whatever. So that's the way that they move up. That's the way that they get down or whatever. It's all about, like you said, a dictatorship, and it's all about power and lust and greed and all that stuff.
Yeah.
They claw their way to the top, literally.
Yeah. Terrible.
See, that's how you can have some compassion, because you could feel bad. Like, what's it got to be like? That's got to be hell. And that's probably what hell, when people talk about hell, that's probably what they're referencing. That's straight up freaking hell. Can you imagine being in this fifth dimension and you're just a servant, and the only way to move up is to eventually plot and kill your master? You know, it's like,
yeah. And I don't even know how that would happen in that realm, right? But basically they just gain more power over it and say, no, now I'm going to be the dictator this time.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but yeah. So anyway, that was like a long session about the raw material and the law of one. And another thing that we had come across was pretty quickly after I started looking at the law of one, I was like excited because I'm like, I'm jumping in, I'm diving in. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, what's it called when you like every day, like every minute, you're like trying to catch up on like all the shows or whatever.
You're like binging.
That, yeah. I was like binging all that. And then Brandon sends me an Archaix video and I'm like, no.
Yeah, it was so timely though. So we're going to be talking about Archaix next. If you're not familiar with him, his name is Jason. He was in a jail in Florida for like 20 years. And I'm sorry, not Florida, Texas. He was incarcerated in Texas. And in Texas, they have all these books in the libraries, all these old books. And somebody I know reached out to me and was telling me that they heard too that the Masons back in maybe the 1800s, they used to fill the jails with all these books because they were trying to get the inmates to get it. Like they'd read it and maybe some of them would get it and they could either recruit them as Masons or rehabilitate them this way. So all these books, though, they ended up most of them in the basement because nobody really reads in prison these days. I mean, I'm sure people read in prison, but it's more about the politics of prison and gangs and stuff. But he happened to go on this path where he started to look at all these old books, and they have all these books from the 1800s and the early 1900s, books that you really can't find today that have all this really interesting information about history and world events and all this crazy stuff that's happened. So a lot of people wrote about this before, but because our society, they burned all the books or whatever, they got rid of all this stuff. We're not. And then now we have modern schooling, which only teaches us what they want us to know to make nice little factory and workers and warriors and stuff. So all this stuff is just missed by us. And he basically spent 20 years reading all these books. He became a librarian. He would get books from benefactors on the outside. He'd get books from other jails and stuff. They would send them to him because they don't care. Like, sure, you're not,
Interlibrary loans.
Yeah. And think about it. They're like, they don't exactly know what's in these books. It's not, I don't think it's like a big cabal of people are like, Mwahaha. So it's just by some crazy synchronicity, all these books survived in the prisons and he read them all. And he came across some pretty interesting stuff. One is the Phoenix phenomenon, which has to do with resets, and another one is the Nemesis phenomenon. In the Phoenix phenomenon, he went back and looked, and every 138 years, going back to like 4000 BC to the present, there seemed to be some kind of event that happened in some part of the world. It wasn't like a worldwide thing. It was just somewhere where like a city got destroyed or something crazy happened there. So he started to look at all the numbers and the mathematics. And then the Nemesis one is kind of like a world reset. Like we think of the flood, like the flood from Noah's Ark. That was, I guess, like a Nemesis event. And his conclusion with this stuff, because he would look back, because the last one that he says that happened was 1902. And you could look back 12 years in the past and 12 years, prior to 1902, and then 12 years ahead of 1902. And all these similar events would happen, kind of like waves. And like I just watched this. Or like a mirror, right? There's like ripples in time. And I watched this video where he broke down how there's a bunch of similarities with the Civil War and what was going on in Europe at the time with the unification of Germany all throughout, like from the 1860s up to 1902, that then got echoed out again into World War II, World War I, and World War II. And one of the crazy ones that he found was, I think it was 43 years from 1902 is 1945 when they allegedly dropped the atomic bombs. And 43 years prior to 1902 is when the Carrington event happened. It's when allegedly all the electronics and the radio equipment or whatever they had back then, the telegraph kind of all got screwed up. People blame like a solar flare or whatever it was. But I just thought that was an interesting one to note. But there was a bunch of them, though. And so by putting all this together, and this guy just took meticulous notes. He'd read all these books all week. And then on Saturday, he would get his notebook and he would just write the title of the book. And then he would go through the books where he left the notes and write all the notes. And then every time he saw his family, he would just give them these notebooks. So he had when he got out. And his conclusion that he came to was that we're living in some kind of simulation. Now, he's not saying it's exactly like simulation theory. He calls it the simulacrum or simulacrum, where it's this constructed reality that was made by other humans that are on the outside, and that these events happen at certain points in human history when, think of like Sodom and Gomorrah, because all the people were living not in accordance with natural law, and there's one good man, but he was saved. So his key is, though, because I've seen a lot of people, because he's saying the next one is 2040. So when you hear that, you're like, oh no, that's only 18 years away. And then 2046 is supposed to be the Nemesis event, which is going to be like the game changer. And that's basically when like poles will shift. But really what he's saying is, like, on a flat earth, it just rotates. And like, North America goes 30 degrees south and Asia will go 30 degrees north. But his main message with this is to not have fear, because if you don't have fear, you can't be affected by it. So that's where I just wanted to say that right up front, because a lot of people I'm seeing are diving into this and they want to know more about the events themselves that are going to happen. And he's kind of like, hey guys, the key is to not have fear about it, because I feel like that's really the pinnacle of all this. But we'll get into this a little later. And the last thing I want to talk about, he thinks that his whole theory is that there's this AIX, which stands for artificial intelligence, and the X is like the X factor, like the unknown, that the Gnostics would call the demiurge, or other people kind of look at the Yahweh in the Bible as like actually an evil character when you're looking at it from like the Gnostic point of view, where he has us like enslaved. And he's saying that the AIX is this computer program that was introduced somehow, or program into this simulacrum or simulacrum, where it's kind of like plays the role of Satan, right? Of the demiurge, of the source of all the evil stuff, I guess, that's going on. I'm not saying I totally agree with all his conclusions, but again, I'm looking at it allegorically, and what can it mean through my point of view? He's looking at it from his point of view, and I'm able to take that information, and I don't have to say, oh, he's wrong about this. No. This dude studied all this stuff for 20 years. I'm sure he's got a lot of great information. So how could we use it to fit into our worldview, right? Or how is it going to shift our worldview, really?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that I believe we live in a simulacrum. It's possible. I'm not saying we don't, but you could still look at his material and have it shape your worldview, even if you don't totally agree with it. So I just
right. And for me, it came across after the Law of One. So when I saw them both, I was like, how do I reconcile them both? And like Brandon said, I wanted to find the allegories and how to match them together to make them make sense. Because again, just like Brandon said, when channeling, the beings are speaking just the words that person can comprehend at that time. And this was the 80s back then. So could it be that the words they were using to describe, because there's a lot of like globe earth terminology in there, and which is fine, but could it be that they weren't going to try to woke rape you on that at the moment? They were just telling you what words that you were going to understand. Because yes, we do, the way we view this world, it looks more like a flat realm in just when we look around us, right? And Jason of Archaix also sees that point of view as well, but at the same time, he sees this place as a simulation, right? And he calls it the simulacrum. So I'm just trying to reconcile what both of these concepts are saying so that I can kind of make a big picture for myself, because we all have to do this. We will all have to make our own points of view by doing this, by looking at other people's perspectives, perhaps, and finding a big picture, and then making that and making your own, drawing your own conclusions from everything.
Yeah. And his point of view actually jives with globe Earth and flat Earth, because he's saying that outside the simulation, it's possible that we live in more of a heliocentric model, you know? So, and his point is, if you're going to simulate something and get it down exactly to certain point and you're going to make it seem like this experience, well, maybe they're simulating something that is real on the outside. So
Yeah.
it's possible that the heliocentric model exists in another realm that we're not privy to. But
All right,
from what
just go ahead.
I was going to say, but from our point of view, it does seem like flat earthers or simulation, like we said in that episode when we we're talking about what's the realm, we're like
Yeah.
flat earthers, you know,
Are
they're onto
onto
something,
something.
right? But this is a way that you can reconcile it and have it make sense both ways. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I forgot what I was gonna say, but
How dare you?
I know.
I'm just kidding.
So
I told you not to forget, remember? You reminded me to
yeah,
tell you to not to forget. And I
yeah.
forgot to remind you.
You forgot to remember.
I forgot.
That's a
So
song.
the big thing
I
we
think
want
it's
to talk
Ella
about was
Fitzgerald too.
fear, not having fear, right? And how we create our own reality. Because what we think or say impacts reality, no matter we want to admit it or not. It really does. And if you think about Owen Benjamin and how he talks about this stuff, and he talks about how to not have fear, right? To just trust in God and to just do it. And that's the same kind of thing that Jason from Archaix is saying. He's like, listen, if you don't have fear, then it can't do anything to you. There's nothing it could do. You could, I mean, if some crazy thing's happening and there's a pole shift, I mean, either you're going to die, which we're all going to die anyway, or a way out will be provided for you. Think about Noah, right? Think about Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah. These, maybe they didn't really happen as they described them in the Bible, but again,
But
it's an
they're allegory for a reason.
to tell you to keep doing your thing and see the signs and just follow it. Watch the synchronicities. Don't have fear, because we're going to tell a story here about a simple, funny story about this stuff. But when you fear, you actually manifest it and you allow the potentiality to exist because you're caught in this thought pattern of what can happen. And then therefore you make it potential. You know, you make it a, not that you always make it a reality, but you make it possible.
Yeah. But Owen does it all the time. And I don't know specific examples because I don't watch his shows religiously. But allegedly, he'll say something one day and he'll like jokingly say, it would be funny if type of thing, da 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 happened. And then like in the next several days, that thing happens, or, you know, several weeks or whatever. But like he'll say something to make fun of what's going on in the world, and then it'll manifest. I mean, just that easily. So it's not, I mean, he's living proof of you create your reality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's because of his audience. His audience is so big, right? But this story I was going to tell, the audience wasn't even that big, and it was just kind
Well,
of.
I just want to say really quickly, I do watch Owen pretty religiously. I'm a big fan of his comedy, and I really like his worldview. It's hilarious, and I feel like, just like you said, his audience, because his audience is probably one of the lowest fear audiences of any audience, right? These the bears, we don't have any fear when it comes to stuff. Sometimes we do. We're not perfect or whatever, but we see the bigger picture. We're able to do that, and because we resonate and we vibrate on the same level as Owen, and or we're adjacent to that vibration, and it's all over the world, and we see that possibility happen. I think that's really what brings it into existence, you know. And I've experienced it. I've been listening to him, and he says something about a bird, and like a bird flies across, you know, like a crazy like hawk or something will fly across when I'm driving, you know, and it's just like, how the hell? Or I'll be looking at something that's like green and he says green, you know, and it's just, it makes you, it's like circumstantial evidence, right? We can't prove it, but here's some funny stories for you. So Anyway, let's tell everybody about
Yeah,
your
yeah,
story
yeah.
because this is hilarious.
Yeah, I was gonna say something about what you were saying. No, I don't remember. But yeah, so oh no, I was gonna say it reminds me of that episode with Christopher Gardner that he had. The last 30 minutes of that episode were crazy.
And we're talking about the
Like,
one from like last month, not the most recent one, because he just did one recently. We're talking about
right.
the one from May. He did one.
Yeah. And we can put the link in the description, but or the at least the episode number. Um, but he basically blew everybody's mind. And this is Christopher Gardner was blowing everybody's mind as he's talking about something about our realm, about the sun, about the arc, about
Yeah,
how
about the arc of the sun and how people
how
experience it
basically
individually.
right. So we create our own reality. We experience that individually.
And all
Like,
these people were so open to hear it and hear that message, and they realized he was speaking truth, even though it might not have been exactly what was right. He was on that that vibration of truth, that resonance, that electronics started screwing up. Like Owen's,
they
he
started
lost him.
vibrating.
Yeah, his computer started freaking out, and then other people reported back in that like somebody's truck didn't start. You know, all this crazy stuff that's never happened before was happening during that stream while they were listening. So there's a little more evidence for you.
Right. So the funny story I was going to tell was that a little while ago, not too long ago, in one of the Telegram chats that I'm in, I don't know why that's not off. There were a few people chatting, and one of them was talking about, you know, the nonsense that's going on and
The 2020 nonsense.
yeah, the 2020 nonsense that continues to go on and how they're trying to create more psyops. And they kind of speculate like, oh, I wonder what the next one's going to be or whatever, jokingly. And then someone said, yeah, it's probably going to be stupider than you can even imagine. And then and then somebody posted like some meme or a picture of an animal, and I don't remember what animal it was, but it was just like, oh, this is the next thing, and it had to do with some animal. Well, not even, I don't even know if it was a day later, the M word pox thing came out, and everybody was like, are you serious? Like, what? What just happened? Did I do that?
Yeah, exactly. And that just really goes to show that there's more people than we even know that are resonating with us around that vibration, and they get it. They realize that there's a lot of crap coming down the line, and like, what the heck is going to be next? M word pox? What?
Yeah. And
Like you
the
couldn't name it
thing,
anything else?
yeah, it's funny. But my thoughts are, I mean, not to offend anybody or cause anybody to spiral, but I think our time could be better spent on manifesting better things than just things like that. Like if we were talking about, you know, what we're going to do with our time, what we're going to do with buying, you know, getting a piece of land or, you know, whatever, like manifest better, I think.
Yeah.
But
Or if you're looking at it from the lens of gratitude, like you're like, oh man, I'm so glad they did all this crazy stuff in 2020 because it woke me up to what this world really is. I made all these great friends. I have all these connections. I don't feel so alone. I don't feel so ostracized in my point of view. You know, oh, great. Now that we're at this step, how great is it going to be in a few years after having this support system? What can we do? What can we build? Right? That's the mindset that's really going to get you to go
right.
places because you
And
count your blessings. You know, a lot of good stuff happened out of this. And I keep saying all the time, it's like the best thing that ever happened. I met Sharon because of it.
best apocalypse ever.
We have the Over Sharon show because of all this crazy stuff. Because if all this crazy stuff didn't happen, who knows if I would ever met Sharon and we would have gotten to this? Probably not, you know?
No, it wouldn't have happened. I mean, I met the lady who told me about the bears, who told me, and then that's how I found Bertaria because of Owen and then the app. So yeah, I
And then I
met you
met
because
Sharon
of the
on
app.
BTA, on
Yeah.
the Beartari Times app, which I highly recommend if you don't have. Even if you're not a fan of Owen Benjamin, those people are on there are the best. And there's nothing Owen on there at all. No, sometimes people post some things, but there's no negativity really allowed. There's nobody, no truther stuff. It's just all people showing the good, the true, and the beautiful. They're just showing their gardens, their kids, hiking pictures, pictures of animals, like ideas. Somebody's like, oh, hey, my chicken is doing this. Is that bad? And then like 10 people respond, or I have a sick cow, or, my child is this or what, and people are just like bang, bang, bang. So it's like this great resource. It's like Reddit used to be really cool for stuff like that, but there's always the negative aspect. It's like Reddit without the negative aspect. Not what Reddit is now, but like what it used to be. What forums used to be, really. It's like what forums used to be with none of the spiraling, with none of the silly arguments at the bottom about like the stupidest things that just derail everything. You just have none of that there. And if they just
And if
ban
you
it,
do, you just
they just delete
report
it.
it and it gets deleted.
Yeah. And you usually don't have to report
And
it. They're pretty on
sometimes,
top of that stuff.
some of my stuff has gotten deleted, but I realized that Owen said a 6-year-old needs to be able to scroll through this and not be like, he should be able to not have earmuffs and eye plugs, eye covers.
Yeah, totally. And it really is something beautiful. And that, again, it's not like you don't even have to be a fan of Owen. Just freaking get on there and go to bear meets, because these people are great. It's good to have people in your area so you don't feel so crazy. You're not the only one that didn't take the experimental medical serum. None of these people did.
There are tons of people. Yeah.
So,
So, what do you
well,
think, B?
I think that's it. We talked about, yeah, I mean, the potentiality when you fear, I just want to say this one more time, when you have fear. And this is an exercise, fear is going to come up, and it's just a normal thing that happens. But when it does come up, the choice is yours if you want to spiral and you want to steep yourself in it, or if you want to just say, you know what, I'm not going to be afraid, because what's the fucking worst thing that's going to happen to me? Am I going to die? Well, guess what? Gonna die anyway. And if I'm supposed to die this way, hey, I guess hopefully somebody makes a hilarious joke out of it. But um, yeah, I mean, I'll just share something really quickly before we wrap up. I have a situation that's going on right now with a DJing situation. I won't get too specific, but a member of my family's getting married, and they want me to DJ it. And for whatever reason, I was put on another wedding the same day. And I talked to the DJ company about it, and I thought they were going to switch me, but they didn't switch me. And it's coming up here in a couple weeks, not even 2 weeks, week and a half away. And so um, I think my family reached out and they said there's nothing they can do. So I'm like, all right, now I'm going to have to say something. But today, instead of calling the DJ company or whatever it was, I just wrote down this whole thing about how this too shall pass, and how it's just going to work itself out, right? And I haven't gotten any responses yet, but I can tell you that randomly the owner of the DJ company that I'm actually good friends with called me to talk about something else. So I didn't even have to call him. He called me. We talked about a bunch of different great synchronicities, synchronicities like the power of belief, because I gave him a crystal. And now anytime he's like at a gig and something's going wrong, he's like, where's that crystal? He's like, it'll be all right if I have that crystal. So his belief is working. So we were talking about that. His mom is going through some stuff with like cancer and stuff. And he was talking about that, how it's, I'll just say he's leaning more toward our side than the mainstream side with all that. She's our, and so then I was able to bring this situation up in a way, and I'm like, hey, is there anything, what could we do? And so he's gonna call the bride of the wedding that I'm DJing to talk about it and explain the situation to her. And I'm like, well, if you tell her that situation, then what is she, I mean, I guess you could say, no, I want Brandon. But so I'm pretty excited about that, because I just let go of my fear of that. I let go of the anxiety. I said, you know what, it's going to work itself out. I've got through other things before, even though this might cause a lot of drama in the family and stuff like that. And, I'd love to be there, obviously. But I just let the universe, instead of sitting there and fearing it and coming up with all these ideas in my head of what can happen, like, oh, if I don't go, this can happen and that can happen. You could just go on forever and ever, and then later I'm going to see him in 50 years and, whatever it is. Or you could just say, it's going to work itself out. And like I did, and instead of just keeping it in my mind, I did something physical. I wrote something out and I put it out there for the universe. Because I think that's a big thing too. A lot of like the book, The Secret. I think I'm going to write a book called The Secret of the Book of the Secret. And it's going to open it up and it's just going to say actions required. Yeah, it's going to be like, this is a secret to the secret. You're going to open the book and it's just going to say action is required. Like you can't just sit at home all day, like wishing. I mean, maybe that'll work. But I think if you start to show the universe, the simulacrum, AIX, whatever the heck this is, God, you start to show that that's what you believe, then that's what it's going to reflect back to you in your life. As weird as that sounds, but
yeah. And what you were saying about the power of belief, Jason just recently did his very first, Jason of Archaix just did his very first podcast with this Greek guy also named Jason. And there was a huge synchronicity that I guess I'll just say it because it was very interesting. So a few days ago, I was talking to Alex, our dear friend, Olive Tree Bear, and we had a good chat. We talked about a lot of stuff. And then he told me, yeah, I have this friend. I just met another bear named Jason, and we're going to finally meet because we're friends, and, we had a great chat and blah, blah, blah. He seems like a really cool guy. And I was like, oh, Jason, that's a Greek name? I didn't even realize that. I'm like feeling like stupid. He's like, I'm like, how do you pronounce that? So he tells me, and I'm like, that's cool. So, leave it at that, whatnot. Well, I believe it was the next day, if not 2 days later, Brandon sends me a link to Jason's of Archaix's first podcast with a guy named Jason, who's also Greek. So I'm like, oh, what a coincidence. I'm going to send this to Alex. I'm like, hey, Alex, check out this guy. He's Greek and his name's Jason. But, this video is really cool too. Check it out. So he responds to me, I think it was this morning, and he's like, that's the same guy that I told you about. I'm like, no way. How does that happen?
So Alex is friends with this guy, Jason, who just did a podcast with Archaix, who's also Jason. But yeah, it's the same freaking guy. That's so crazy.
I was like, what the heck? How does that even happen? So anyway, that particular podcast, they talk about the power of belief. It was so good. Really, really good podcast. Yeah. So,
and I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a chance we might have some very interesting guests coming up, and I'm just going to leave it at that. So anyway, Sharon,
we're going to have some fun guests.
Some fun guests. That's
Really
all I'm going to say. Right after you said that about Jason and Alex, I'm just going to be like, hey, I think we're going to have some fun guests, but who knows, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, is that it, Sharon? Is there anything else you wanted to add to this episode?
That was it.
I think we could stick a fork in this one. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Over Sharon Show. There's several ways you can support us if you like us. Go to morelawsmoreproblems.com, find the tab for Over Sharon, and there you will find us, our story. You can find several ways to donate to us. And always make sure you leave comments. If you have questions, please leave them underneath. Sometimes we make episodes out of the questions, but we always do love the support. Thank you guys for the chat. We usually premiere the show every Thursday night, and we have a live chat. We hang out, and it's really fun conversations that we have in there. So shout out to the chat. Thank you guys for coming. You guys are the best.
Hit that thumbs up.
Hit thumbs up, subscribe, overshare the show. Don't woke rape anybody, though. Just be like, hey, check out these silly people and what they're talking about. They're not making claims, but could it be they're onto something? Could it be?
I like that.
Could it be? I think it might be, but who knows? What do I know? It's my show. All right, Sharon, what do we say to the good people?
that if you're not oversharing,
then you're totally not caring.
That's right.
So overshare and share on. Later, everybody.